start taking zinc. I feel great. I see big cognitive improvements. I keep taking that zinc, Now I have zinc excess, and I develop copper deficiency. If you're low in that nutrient, yes, you want to fix that, but you have to be careful that you don't become toxic.
We are, in our day and age, fighting a constant battle in this post-industrial era against everything from toxins and heavy metals to electromagnetic fields and cell phones and Wi-Fi radiation, a constant bombarding with things that cause inflammation or oxidation.
If the soil's not as good, the food nutrients are not as good. So almost everybody recognizes that the food supply has less nutrients in it. You're not getting the same levels of magnesium, you're not getting the same levels of vitamin D as you were from 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, our parents and our grandparents. That means that unless you eat a perfect diet, you're not going to get the nutrients you need.
Welcome to episode 9, our final episode in the Supplements Revealed docuseries. You've made it this far. To me, that gives you hero status. Wow, what a journey this has been. Dozens of interviews along the way. We most certainly, though, are not done yet. Before we jump into episode 9, I just want to remind you that during this free viewing period, we have the discounted packages to own Supplements Revealed. You will be able to buy it at some points in the future, but you're going to be paying more than double the amount you would right now. So now's the time to invest in this. Get it at the discounts that we have. We have multiple packages. Pick the right one that's for you. And also what we're adding during the free viewing period are these incredible bonuses. These bonuses aren't just lip service. They have profound and real value, and you can't get them anywhere else. You should check them out. They're unique to Revealed Films. There's something we're offering right now, and there's not just one or two. There are several bonuses that can have a profound impact and really enhance your Supplements Revealed experience. So check it out, see what package is right for you, invest in this docuseries, support our vision, and have a better and healthier future. All right, we're going to jump in right now. Episode 9's coming up. Finish strong here. There's great information here. Let's jump in, pay attention. Here we go. Welcome back. In this particular segment, it's going to be myself and my partner Jeff Hayes, who's the producer of Supplements Revealed, reflecting upon our experience. We start out at a point A saying we have a vision for this project, but then after all the travel, the interaction, meeting all these experts, having these conversations, editing it all, there's some takeaways that we have that we felt would be really great to share with you. Originally, Jeff, this was your idea to do a Supplements Revealed docuseries. What got you to want to do that?
Well, you bust my chops for this quite often. I take a lot of supplements. I always have. I like supplements. I don't mind spending money on supplements. And so over the time, the last 20 years of doing it, now when you and I are out doing these interviews, we end up talking to experts, and one of them will say, oh, you got to take this. One of them will say, you got to take that. Somebody mentions, oh, you got to take a net OE. Here's a study about that. And every time I hear that, you're doing the interview, I'm sitting there making notes and I go, order a net OE, and so my supplement bag has just grown and grown and grown, and to where now it's like a standing joke. If I go in a restaurant and order my little baggie of supplements for lunch is sitting on the table, the waitress is like, is that for the restaurant? Is that for, for everybody here? And so what I learned in doing this with you is a lot of the things I'm taking actually compete with one another. Mm-hmm. Some of them, even though they might be synergistic in my body, they use the same pathway. Mm-hmm. They compete for that pathway, so I'm wasting my money. worse is I'm not getting the benefit. So in spite of my affection for supplements and what, the knowledge that I have, I was still pretty lost. And so I thought this would be a great idea. Let's go out and interview the best experts that we can find and see if we can help somebody navigate through this path. And then what we learned was so much more than I expected.
Yeah, I'm sure you had the feeling too, because what you said was very true for me, is that when you hear somebody talk about whatever their area of expertise is, it's like, I got to have that, and I have to have that. But for us, we knew that there were supplements in the world, or maybe manufacturers in the world, or marketers in the world that could also be somewhat unscrupulous, that could be making claims or representations about a supplement and the benefits weren't really there. And Jeff and I are both people with a lot of experience in this realm, and for us, it was tough to navigate. So in trying to think about the average consumer, we're like, wow, this is a daunting task. And one of the things that we felt was important is the understanding that we knew supplements could be of great benefit. Both of us are consumers of supplements. I have been since I'm a teenager. My father had a health food store. So looking at what is contemporary science, was it supporting, what can we take, where's the biggest leverage points, the varying points of view, that's what got us to want to do this project. What were some of the most surprising things for you?
Well, I mentioned Annette O.E. Jonathan Lizotte is the president and founder of Designs for Health. And when we turned off the camera, and he talked about Annette O.E. and in that interview, he talks about there was a study done with women that had stage 4 ovarian cancer, and with just this particular type of E, which is not the type of E that's sold normally. As a matter of fact, it's antagonistic to the other type of E. With just that, they doubled the lifespan of the women that had ovarian cancer in the study. And as you know, my fiance had ovarian cancer. Yes. I'm keenly interested in this. So when we turned the cameras off, I asked him, okay, John, what if you had just one thing, what would it be? Cameras aren't rolling, because he has everything available to him, and he's got a brand new 1-year-old baby. And he says, without a doubt, it's the Annette O.E. If I was, couldn't take, my 1-year-old baby takes it, I take it, my wife takes it, my dog takes it.
Wow.
And so when I hear something like that, I'm like, okay, I'm in. John Hewlett, as you know, his Cardio Miracle, and again, we don't sell this stuff. I buy this stuff. We don't sell it. John Hewlett, his Cardio Miracle, I took that first 4 or 5 years ago in a test batch that he was so excited. He literally drove up to my house to deliver this. And at the time he lived in Montana, but he happened to be in Utah. They drove up and delivered, and he's like, okay, now the only bad thing about this is we haven't got it yet where it'll mix in water. So I had to mix it with hot water, cool it down, and then drink it after that. But that was just the test batch. He dialed the formula in after that. But I've been taking that for years. This is like a profoundly useful product. I loved hearing him talk about that.
It's funny because you called him the Johnny Appleseed
of nitric oxide.
Of nitric oxide, and I heard you say that so abstractly, but then he showed up, and he was Johnny Appleseed. I mean, he had this big personality, and he's a big guy. But he had a completely different career and a career background, and then got into this. And ever since that interview, that's one of the products that I've been taking every day. As a matter of fact, I just ran out and I came here this morning. I said, "Hey, can I have some of your Cardio Miracle?" It's a great product, and I learned a lot about the implications of nitric oxide, heart health, energy, mitochondria. All that stuff comes together there. So that is also, I think, a big one that was like, okay, this was a surprise, and the messenger, I think, was very important in that particular one too, to get you to pay attention. Because what happens, I think, a lot of times, if you have somebody who's an academic who has really great information, but they're kind of boring, you're not really leaning in and listening to them, and maybe something is missed. So
can I talk about somebody that's boring that didn't make it?
Yeah.
I may want to self-edit, but I'm just going to go for it. This is behind the scenes. But there's a product that we interviewed without the cameras rolling, the salesperson for the product, and it was absolutely phenomenal. A type of CoQ10 that it really was fabulous. Like, I've taken it ever since that interview. The guy was brilliant. He goes, "You got to talk to our scientist." And so we talked to his scientist, and his scientist, he had the facts, but he had none of the passion for the product.
Right.
And it was like, what a bummer that
It was I know exactly who you're talking about, and doesn't mean he's a bad scientist, but it's the message and getting the message is important, and the research was there, the data was there, but the delivery of being able to get you to want to receive that message wasn't there. So.
Yeah.
That gets into the whole marketing side of this whole thing too.
That's the other part that we had trouble with this series, where we want the people that are on it not to sell their product. We kept telling them, look, this is not an infomercial. Talk about the category, talk about the science. People will figure out, that you're a good representative. And a couple of the people just couldn't not do an infomercial.
Right.
And it's like, look, we're sharing information. We're not selling stuff.
Yeah.
And if you're coming on our platform, you're not here to sell, you're here to share. And so there was a lot of interviews that we couldn't use because they just couldn't stop selling.
This is literally a documentary, so it's understandable how people might be very passionate about their product and why, and they should think it's the greatest thing in the world. I mean, that's their job to think it's the greatest thing in the world. But nonetheless, one of the aspects of our journey in trying to present this to you was being able to have people who could communicate effectively in this medium do that, and not also be like slick or salesy in a particular product, but to have you learn something and have takeaway value. Any other highlights, anything other standouts?
So this is actually kind of a small one, but my friend Dr. Trevor Cates, and it was about skincare. And Trevor's been trying to get me to use her skincare system she's given me, her little packets. I'm like, I'm not going to rip open a little packet. So literally my skincare system has been, when I wash my hair in the morning, I get water on my face, and when I get out of the shower, I dry my face, and that's my skincare regimen. Mm-hmm. People don't realize that skincare, especially women who use so much of it, they are putting so many toxins in their body. And so I didn't have to worry about that because I'm not putting anything on my face. Shampoo rolls on my face. That's about it. And so I started on her skincare system maybe 4 months ago, and I am addicted to it. It's like I take it with me when I travel, and so it wasn't one of these. This is going to double the life of ovarian cancer patients, but it's something that now I use and enjoy, and I think you'll admit I look pretty fresh.
Yeah, you look pretty good.
Yeah, that's it. Oh, and speaking of which,
yes.
Every time, and Patrick is a perfect example of someone who walks his talk, who lives healthy. And you're 60 years old, is that right?
I am 60 years
so
old.
So he's he's 60 years old, and when people ask me, your partner Patrick, how old is he? And he's 60, and they're like, what? And I've always thought, nobody says that about me. When I say I'm 61, everybody's like, yep. I see it. But this is really somebody who, and I like it because of your health background, that you actually personify what you're doing. It's like our friend Kathy Smith is 68 this year, and is a unit. And this is what a life can look like if it's. And it's certainly, and we brought this up a lot in the series, it's not just supplements. It's supplements plus the right attitude, plus exercise, plus getting the majority of your nutrients from healthy foods.
Yes.
You mix those together, and we really can live a different kind of life.
It was one of the points made over and over again, is that supplements are exactly that. They're supposed to be supplements. They're not like the primary. They're the supplement to what your lifestyle is. Your lifestyle is the primary, and I think that was a big point. One of the big takeaways I had was that there is a broad-based perception that's promulgated that the supplement industry is unregulated. And this has big consumer implications, especially for you, because lots of times ignorant doctors will say, oh, you can't trust supplements, it's unregulated. They'll say things or the way they manufacture, etc. That stuff's not regulated, and you could be sold a bill of goods, might even hurt you. But if you watch the series, you know that there is extraordinary amounts of regulation within the supplement industry. And we really reviewed how to spot that stuff, how to look, for GMP, the good manufacturing practicing manufacturers, for example, and how much regulation really is there for people to comply as far as what kind of claims can be made, etc. So don't be under the impression that this is an unregulated industry. It doesn't mean that there aren't bad actors. There are many bad actors in it. We spoke about that too. But it is a very, very regulated industry, and I believe that regulation serves us very, very well. So that was one of the big things. I knew there was some regulation, but when we got into the details around it and the people who really work in the area of regulation, that was a big deal. Another thing for me that I was really interested in exploring was the debate between organic versus non-organic supplements. Does it really matter? Organic supplements are, routinely more expensive than non-organic supplements. Just like in the grocery store, organic food is more expensive than non-organic food. And there were definitely disparate opinions about this amongst the experts. Some experts said, I don't know that it really makes that big a difference. Other experts were adamant about the fact that you really want to put organic supplements in your body. So my personal takeaway was, go organic. Organic is important. It's worth the extra money. I think it has implications to bioavailability, but also just what's in the supplement, if it's not organic, is something that I would have a concern about. So that was something for me that was clarifying.
And it may be because it was a pre-existing belief, but this is where I landed. I've argued with this. One of our experts is a PhD, Brian Haycock, knows way more than you and I will know in our lifetime. He will cover in a week, and he will tell you, look, I've looked at them under a microscope. Atoms are atoms. This is organic or inorganic. It doesn't make any difference. And I don't care what he says. I know in my soul that he's wrong.
Yeah.
These things that come from life, there's a magic element. Science can make a grain of wheat. I mean, literally, we can create a grain of wheat, and you can plant it and you can water it, and nothing will happen. But you can open one of Pharaoh's tombs from 5,000 years ago, and wheat that was buried with one of these pharaohs, plant it in the ground, water it, and that wheat will grow. There's a life force that is there. And so as far as that argument, I've listened to both sides. I may be irrational about this, but for me, I love my stuff to come from an organic source.
Yeah, and I don't think that's irrational at all. I think that that's prudent. We had many people who are also great experts advocate for organic, and they had, I think, very good reasoning behind that. Also, one of the big questions is price point. Here's a multivitamin that's $20, $25 a month, and here's one that's $70 a month. Are they really that much different? My takeaway after talking to many, many people about this throughout the series is that as a rule, it's not 100%, but as a rule, you really are getting what you pay for. The cheaper supplements are not as good as the more expensive supplements usually. I don't think that's 100%, but I think it's most of the time. So price does matter. And typically the price is going to be reflecting things like, is it organic, maybe even fermented, which is even a step, if it's organic and fermented, it's going to bring more bioavailability. And you heard many of the experts talk about bioavailability, because what really matters isn't how much is in the capsule or the tablet or the liquid. What matters is how much is actually getting into your body. And one of the things I found interesting, for lack of being a bit crass, but one of the things that's evidence that something that's passing through your body and not getting absorbed is if your urine turns really yellow. So if you start taking a new supplement, you're like, oh, look, my urine's a different color, it must be working. Actually, chances are it's passing through your body and not getting absorbed, so it might not be the best supplement.
Yeah, this was, when we talked about, we literally sat down and said, okay, we're doing Supplements Revealed. what's the makeup of this going to be? And we said, okay, we want it 70-30, about 30% explaining the bad practices so people can avoid getting ripped off. But for 70% of the series, we wanted to shine a light on really great companies. And that's where one of the things that I noticed 20 years ago is the companies that charge high prices for their product, one of two things is happening. They're either spending the money on making a super good product, but there's also companies that charge high prices for a product, and all that extra money they spend on marketing.
Yeah.
And so the companies with the highest quality products are generally not the ones that have the biggest marketing budget.
Right.
And so I wanted us to cover the bad practices of the industry, but it was really a blast to be able to spotlight companies that are biting the bullet and really including good ingredients. But a code word that I use, and I've talked to you about this, when I buy a vitamin that has B6 in it, or a formula that has B6 in it, they can use pyroxidine hydrochloride, I think and that's the inactive form of B6. It's cheap as the dirt on your shoes, and it's what you find 90% of the time. Some supplements will use P5P, which this version of B6 is the active form. And I think it costs about 10 times as much per kilo. And so no consumer knows the difference. Either way, it's going to say B6 is in the product. And so, consumer doesn't know, so they don't gain any sales by using that. And so if I see somebody use that in a product, I know, okay, these guys are committed to a quality product.
Yeah, it's kind of a sign that they're willing to invest more money.
Yep.
And one of the things I think I learned talking to many of the people in the project was how the internet is changing the game here quite a bit insofar as how individual manufacturers on their sites will really speak to the details. They'll have third-party lab testing that could be there that they can show, and other things to validate what's in their product. So it used to be, hey, you go to the store and you're looking at the label, but now, and I've done this many times now I'm in the store, I look at a particular product I have an interest in, I could take out my phone, go to their website and start looking at any of the third-party lab testing that they've done. So I think transparency and independent verification, almost like a self-policing, because consumers are getting more sophisticated, is starting to take hold in the industry, and I think that's an important development. So let me ask you this, maybe some closing thoughts. For what your expectations were in the beginning as far as the scope of this and what it would turn out like, how did it actually turn out compared to what you're thinking about pre-production?
Oh, so when we were building these episodes, and what we, again, this is behind the scenes. When we're building an episode, we go, okay, this one's a little dull, so let's make sure we put somebody with a lot of energy, a really great interview here. Then we'll slip this one in because the information's good, but maybe they were,
right,
not as exciting. And then we'll follow that very quickly with another exciting interview. And this one, as we were building the episodes, I kept looking at the spreadsheet, going, this is flipping great.
Yeah.
And I am so happy. I hope you liked it, but this is the best survey of the supplement industry that I've ever seen, and I really like the way it came out.
Yeah, me too. I felt like it was like an embarrassment of riches. I mean, we ended up with more interviews than we initially expected. As a matter of fact, I remember one time along the way, I said, geez, I think we could be pretty close to finished production. And you're like, oh, no, we got a long way to go. And you're like, I think we got 48 in the can already.
Yeah. And I literally called you the next day and went, I think we're done.
Yeah, we had a lot of information covering a variety of topics that are, some of them are hot, and I don't want to call them fads, but they're explosive, like CBD or microbiome stuff where you hear a lot. And then some of maybe the more obscure things that we felt like were important still to know about. So many angles to this industry, but I think it's impossible for anybody to go through this entire series and not be completely 360-degree educated about supplements, and that they would have a lot more confidence. In the end, that's really what I was hoping for, that number one, people would recognize how important a role supplements could play in their life for themselves and for people that they're responsible for or that they care about. And number two, that as much as maybe there's some criticism of the industry, there's a lot of very smart and passionate people who really care. I mean, I got to experience them, as did Jeff, off camera. We got to just see what they're like and what their lives are like, what they're talking about when the camera and the lights are on and now they're on their game. And I could tell you that these people really, really care about what they do. I would say a majority of them would be doing the work they were doing if they didn't need to make the money, if they were independently wealthy. As a matter of fact, if they were independently wealthy, they'd probably put more money into
some of them
efforts.
are.
Yeah, and some of them are.
There's two people in the series, and I won't identify them by name, who don't have to work another day in their life. One of them is a guy that doesn't have to work another day, nor will his kids. I mean, literally the reason he's in this is
with a great
his
purpose.
gift. Yes.
Yeah. So to me, it outpaced my expectations. I think it's the greatest assembly of wisdom and contemporary wisdom around supplementation. I don't think there's anything else on the planet that can match it. And I'm more than satisfied. We're proud of the result of it. And now our hope is that it delivers value to you and that it makes a difference in the world.
Yeah, we really hope you like it.
Sometimes a human being's story can give you goosebumps. And I know that when I interviewed Dr. Terry Wahls, that's exactly what happened for me. It's really interesting when the doctor becomes their own patient, searching for solutions. MS, or multiple sclerosis, is something that's very prevalent out there in the world. Many people are challenged by it, and the solutions in the conventional realm are not so good. Terry Wahls is a researcher and has created natural protocols through supplementation and other things that has led to some extraordinary results. This is an interview that's a human interest story as much as it is something that you're going to learn to tell you how powerful supplementation can really be in your life. Terry, thanks so much for doing this. Really excited to have this conversation. You have quite a story. And it's getting well known out there because I think it's an inspiration to a lot of people. So do you mind sharing it with us?
Sure. So I'm a academic internal medicine physician, which means I worked for years at a university setting, University of Iowa, in the Iowa City Veteran Affairs Hospital. And I was a very conventional internal medicine doc, very skeptical of special diets, supplements, complementary alternative medicine. But God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah.
I began to have problems with my left leg, and I began stumbling. Ultimately, ended up seeing a neurologist, getting MRIs of my brain, my spinal cord, spinal tap, nerve conduction velocities. And I was told I had relapsing, remitting multiple sclerosis. He reminded me that 13 years earlier, I'd had an episode of dim vision in my left eye. And that was probably optic neuritis. He recommended that I begin disease-modifying therapy, but he also suggested I get a second opinion, so I went off to the Cleveland Clinic. They looked at the MRIs, examined me, and said, yes, you definitely have relapsing remitting MS, and agreed I should begin disease-modifying therapy, which I did.
So disease-modifying therapy, what does that mean?
So that means I was taking a daily injection to try and blunt my immune cells' attack of self, in my case, the myelin, the insulation on the wiring between brain cells. And so for the next 3 years, I had just one episode of weakness involving my right hand. And so had I been in a drug trial, that would have been considered a phenomenal success. But the problem was I was continuing to get slowly weaker, and within 3 years, I was in a wheelchair, actually a tilt-recline wheelchair. My torso muscles were getting weak. It was hard to sit up. I was having more and more fatigue. Now, I'm going to back up for just a moment. My Cleveland Clinic physicians had suggested that I look at the work of Loren Cordain, and so I read his papers, his books, and decided after a lot of meditation and prayer to go back to eating meat, because I had been a vegetarian for 20 years. So I took out all grains, all legumes, all dairy, reintroduced meat. I continued to decline. In the following year, I needed a tilt-recline wheelchair. But I stayed with the paleo diet because it's like, at least I was doing something.
Yeah.
And I took mitoxantrone, a form of chemotherapy. I continued to decline. Then my physician suggested I take Tysabri, that new biologic drug. I was very excited, and they were very excited to give that to me. I continued to decline. And then I was switched to Cellcept, another potent immune suppressing drug. And I continued to decline. And that's when, it was apparent to me that seeing the best people in the country at the best center in the country taking the newest drugs was likely to not stop my slide into a bedridden, possibly demented, and possibly uncontrolled, horrific pain related to trigeminal neuralgia. Very tough future.
Was your decline considered faster than typical, slower than typical?
Definitely faster. Usually you convert from relapse remitting to secondary progressive at about 10 to 15 years. So I made my conversion 3 years after my diagnosis. So that's much earlier than expected. The fatigue came on earlier. It was very difficult. Now, it's very fortunate for me. The university was redesigning my job to make it easier for me to continue to work. One of the things they did was they assigned me to the Institutional Review Board. So I was reviewing research, and I said, give me all the human stuff related to brains. So I was getting more and more comfortable reading the research.
Not just MS specifically, but
No, I was
looking at
reading,
all neurodegeneration.
Neurodegenerations, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, mental health issues. So it got me more comfortable reading these clinical trials, most of which were drugs. And then I finally sort of had this aha, like, maybe I should be looking for some vitamin and supplement studies. There really wasn't anything in the MS world, but I was beginning to read about the animal models using vitamins and supplements for animal models of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, Lou Gehrig's, Huntington's disease. And in all of those circumstances, the mitochondria were sending signals to die too early. So, I decided, and it was about 2004, that it was the mitochondria that were the big players in neurodegeneration. And even though nobody was talking about it with MS, I thought mitochondria were probably a player in multiple sclerosis. And so my next focus was, what supplements could I take to boost the effectiveness of my mitochondria?
Interesting. Now, I'm hearing very much the story from you as the researcher, medical doctor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What was going on as you, the mother and human being? What was that experience during all this?
So, I grew up on a farm in Northeast Iowa. And we had chores, we had work, and you had real responsibilities because you understood that was part of being a farm kid. And so when I had my kids, my spouse and I talked about that it was really important for our kids to have real chores. And then, I end up getting MS when my kids are really quite young, 5 and 8. And by the time they're 8 and 11, I'm in a wheelchair.
Wow.
And so my kids have real chores, and they're helping with meals, they're helping with making the beds, they're helping with doing laundry, and they have real work, and they're sort of pissed off and crabby about it. But I'm like, life's not fair, and you're right, it's really not fair that you have these chores. And it's not fair that I have MS, but I have to go to work anyway, even though it's hard for me. And you're going to have to do these chores, even though it's hard for you and it feels unfair. I remember my kids, both throwing fits and having little tantrums about that, and shouting back at me, "Mom, you are glad you have MS, so you can lecture us about chores."
Wow.
But I think it was very helpful for them because they understood at an early age, life's not fair, but you do the best you can. And I understood that my kids were watching me. And so I had a lot of time as I was having to reimagine my life as once an athlete to becoming progressively more and more disabled. What was it that was most important to me? And that was having kids that could grow up to be successful emotionally, successful financially. And so I could still model for them. So you're watching me, what I do. I can either give up when things are difficult, and I certainly thought about that, or I could keep going to work every day, no matter what, and stay positive every day, no matter what. And so my decision was I could choose to be resilient. And I could model that you stay resilient, life's not fair, but you keep doing the best you can anyway.
Did you continue to have hope that you were going to find a solution?
Oh, I knew that was not going to happen. My physicians had always told me, and all the research I'd read was progressive MS is progressive, that functions once lost are gone forever. So, when I couldn't ride my bike anymore, I gave it to my son, and it was sadness, but I let go of that. And there's a process you go through when you have a progressive illness or a terminal illness of anger, which I went through. And then you finally get to acceptance. And you finally get to the point of, well, I don't know what's coming ahead. All I can do is just take each day as it unfolds. And so as I was experimenting on my vitamins and supplements, I wanted to slow the speed of my decline. I knew recovery was not possible. And so, I'm about 6 months into my vitamin cocktail.
And that was driven by wanting to support the mitochondria.
All mitochondria. I'm going to support my mitochondria. I'm going to slow my decline, stretch this out a little bit longer, because I don't want to become a financial burden on my family. And after 6 months, I'm like, this is a waste of money. And I stopped.
You weren't seeing results within that 6 months?
I didn't see any results. And I just thought, this is crazy. The skeptical physician won out. And after all, I was basing all this on animal model research. That wasn't even for MS. It's, for other neurodegenerative diseases. So I got cranky and I quit. And I couldn't get out of bed the next day to go to work. Or the next day. And on the third day, my wife comes in and says, honey, I think I ought to take these. So I took them, and the next morning I could get up and go to work.
Immediately. Like one day later, you take them and...
The next morning I could get up and I could go to work, and I was feeling, well enough that I could go to work. I thought, wow, now that's really interesting. So a couple weeks later, I stopped everything. And so you stop them. The next day you can work. The next day, you can't. The fatigue is just so profound. And then I waited 3 days again, and I took my supplements. And the next morning the fatigue was back to its usual level. And so I am pumped. I am so excited. Like, okay, I'm figuring stuff out that my neurologist is not talking about, my personal physician's not talking about. I am much more confident now that I can slow my disease. And so I am much more energized about volunteering, asking to be the primary reviewer for more of these brain-based studies. And I'm getting more facile with doing PubMed searches myself, and getting slowly more comfortable with reading and thinking about mitochondria. And then in the summer of 2007, I'm losing my keys, I'm losing my phone. I've had to replace my smartphone 3 times, my fancy keys with remotes 3 times. That's very expensive. And I'm beginning to have issues with brain fog. My chief of staff calls me in and tells me he's going to assign me to the traumatic brain injury clinic come January. And in the traumatic brain injury clinic, I'll be there with the phys med doc, a psychiatrist, a neuropsychologist, a speech therapist, and there'll be me. And I'll have about 20 minutes with these patients. There'll be no residents. It's going to be highly visible, and that's where we're assigning you. And I come home and I talk to Jackie, and we both know that they're assigning me this job, so I have to face that I'm going to have to apply for disability. Because it's a job that physically, because I have to be having to get up, do the exams. She said, you can't do that job. I said, well, in January, I'll go to that clinic, and either I can do it or I can't, and then I'll finally have to apply for disability.
And you're in a wheelchair at this point?
I've been in a wheelchair for 4 years.
Wow, okay.
But the VA and the university had redesigned my job multiple times. I was staffing clinics in the residence. I was with the IRB. But if now it's going to have this clinical responsibility without residents, that was a task.
Wow.
That was going to be beyond me.
So you give yourself till January, yeah.
So that's, I think at the end of June, I'm having that conversation. He says, okay, at the middle of January, you're going to be in the traumatic brain injury clinic. In August, the beginning of August, I'm reviewing an IRB protocol that uses electrical stimulation of muscles in people who've been newly spinal cord injured, and so they're paralyzed. And they're asking to extend the study because these men and women are experiencing improved psychological health, improved quality of life. They still can't walk, and they're hooking up their quads and their glutes every day. I just think, wow, this is really interesting.
I'd say it's interesting because they're not regaining the function, in as far as they're walking, but it's creating a psychological shift. Yeah.
But it's having a huge impact on it. And what they're doing is they're maintaining muscle mass in their legs, in their upper legs, in their thighs, in their butt muscles, in that's having measurable benefits. And so these men and women, they're asking to extend the study for another 2 years. So it gets me thinking, like, God, So I do a quick search. There's 212 articles. That's really not so many. So I go through all those abstracts, and there's only a few clinically in cerebral palsy and stroke, otherwise athletes. So, and I tell Jackie I want to order a device. She says, nope, you can't do that. But you can make an appointment with a physical therapist who treats athletes and talk with him. So I do that. I go see Dave, and he tells me, it's not approved, it hurts, you have a lot of neuropathic pain, I don't know that you can tolerate it. But we continue talking, and he agrees to give me a test session. It is quite painful, but at the end, it was also exhilarating. So he let me come 3 times a week for a couple of weeks. After that, I decided I was tolerating it well, so I got a homegoing device, and I started doing e-stim. And so I started doing e-stim at home. That was in November, because I'd done it in his clinic a couple of weeks in October. At the same time, I had come across the organization called the Institute for Functional Medicine, and they had a course on neurodegeneration. So I ordered it, a big binder of cases to go through, and about 40 hours of lectures and PowerPoints with audio syncs. So I went through that. I'm taking notes in the midst of my brain fog. But now I have a longer list of supplements and more reinforcement that there are other people out there like me that are thinking mitochondria are the big drivers.
And in the supplements, as this list that's expanding.
This list is expanding.
And is it all still, so you're still thinking in terms of mitochondrial support?
Yeah, this is all mitochondrial support.
Now, just in case somebody might not understand, what is the function of the mitochondria?
So the mitochondria are the ancient bacteria from about 1.5 billion years ago that could cope with oxygen and generate ATP or energy more efficiently. And they were engulfed by bigger bacteria. And they thrived, which then evolved into animals like you and me and allowed us to have our organs and our tissues specialize into muscles and bones and nerves and glands. But in every one of our cells, it's the mitochondria that generates the energy that lets us specialize into our activity more effectively. And when the tissues that use the most energy, brain, retina, and heart, will have the most mitochondria. And so if your mitochondria begin to not do well, your brain suffers, your retina suffers, or your heart suffers. And then eventually you can have other organs that suffer as well.
And what kind of supplements were giving support to the mitochondria?
So, I was focused in on B vitamins, coenzyme Q, some ribose, lipoic acid, carnitine, a variety of minerals, and then a variety of fats. Because if you remember in biology, you have the little bean with a lot of squiggles inside. All of those squiggles are membranes, and all of these proteins have to sit in a membrane, which is a fat layer. It's like a fat wrapper. So fats, B vitamins, some sulfur amino acids, a lot of minerals.
So and then you start putting that together.
So I put that together. So I'm doing e-stim. I'm doing my supplements. Nothing dramatic is happening yet. I can maybe sit up a little bit better. Now, I should tell you, at this point, I'll let me sort of set the stage as to what my life is like in August of 2007. I have 2 walking sticks. I can walk like 10 feet, okay, slowly. I have a tilt-recline wheelchair at work. I have a zero-gravity chair at work where I can lean back. My knees are higher than my nose. And I have another one at home. I cannot sit up in a regular chair like I am now. If I do that for more than 10 minutes, I'm flat out exhausted. I cannot function. I have fatigue by 10 in the morning. I'm having more trouble with episodes of trigeminal neuralgia, where I get these sharp jolts of electrical face pain, usually on the right, but sometimes on the left. It's like a jolt of electricity that starts about here, spreads up to my temple, across my jaw, deep behind my eye. And when these come on, I would go to the pain clinic, I'd get injections, and then I would take Cytomedrol. In the most recent time, I'd gone to the pain clinic for injections every day, and I'd take a gram of Cytomedrol. Usually 3 days turns it off. It hadn't, so they extended it to 5 days to get it turned off. Wow. And over the years that I'd been having that, which had been 27 years, I could see that these episodes were getting more frequent, more severe, and more difficult to turn off. So I'd come to terms with the fact that I may become bedridden, I may become demented, but I still had not really come to terms with the fact that my fear, when the pain turns on, if it does not turn off, every sensory input, light, sound, swallowing, a light touch, is transmuted into this intense electrical jolt of pain. And so when this turns on, our kids would go stay somewhere with someone else. They'd take the dog with them. I'd sit very quietly in a dark room. I would drool because swallowing, profoundly difficult to experience, and very difficult for anyone else to watch.
Wow. I've never had trigeminal neuralgia, but it's most people characterize it as pretty much the worst pain you can have.
It's like you can think of it as like a pain seizure. The sensory input amplifies, and the brain has lost the ability to modulate it, turn it down. And so people with trigeminal neuralgia typically, it's not at all uncommon for them to kill themselves. For them, in Kevorkian, the fellow who was doing assisted suicide, the most common diagnosis was trigeminal neuralgia.
Wow, I didn't know that. Wow.
I totally understand that. So I'd come to terms with, you're going to be bedridden, you're going to be potentially demented. And my fear, which I couldn't talk to anyone about, was the pain might turn on and be stuck permanently on.
Wow. My
boss has just given me a job that I know I can't do. And likely I'll be having to file for disability in January. And I'm trying to reassure Jack that, we'll go to work and either I can do it or I can't.
And as you already cited, the idea of being disabled and not being able to work is not the type of thing you wanted to be your children to see.
That was not what I wanted to model, and it's like, okay, I have this new assignment, and I'm going to go do it, and that's just how it is. And then I learned about the E-STEM, and I started doing that. And now, when I start the E-STEM, I'm going to get the device for a year. Dave says, we can grow more muscle. I'm not sure we're helping you if you grow a muscle that you can't use. That's like putting ankle weights on it, and I may be making you worse. So it's critical that you exercise. You have to be volitionally contracting your muscles when we stimulate them. And it's 45 minutes of contraction per day will grow more muscle. 15 minutes will maintain the muscle you have. And so you want me to work on my belly, my back, and my butt muscles. Of course, everything was weak. It's this huge asymmetry. my right thigh is 3 inches larger in circumference than my left thigh.
Wow.
My right calf is like, I think, 2 inches larger than my left calf. My arms, I didn't bother measuring because that was too complicated to measure by myself. And my butt cheeks, hugely different between my left and my right. And when I start, I'm doing 10 minutes of E-stim, and I'm laying on my back, I'm reaching up to my knees, and sucking in my gut. That's my exercise. I'm laying on my belly, and I'm stimulating my back, and I'm trying to lift one arm up, and then the other arm. And then try and lift one leg up, and the other leg up. I do that for 10 minutes. And I'm dialing it up to as much pain as I can take. I'm sort of sweating and grunting. Jack's going like, "Are you sure you should be doing that?" Like, well, I wasn't going to leave any effort on the table. And then I decide, I'm everything's weak. I got to figure out how to do this while I'm at work. So I take my device, and if I'm not seeing patients, I'm hooking myself up, and I'm doing isometrics and stimulating my muscles. So over the next several months, I'm adding more minutes and more muscles to my daily workout. So if I'm talking to people, I have the current down so I can talk and you have no idea that I'm stimming.
Right.
If no one's in my office, I have it dialed up. And then I can work for 30 seconds, and then, it's back to the 10 seconds, as much pain as I can tolerate with an isometric contraction. And that's what I'm doing, because I'm like, in January, I'm going to be disabled. So I'm doing everything that I possibly can to be in a little bit better shape, so I could maybe not have to take my retirement in January. And then now at that same time, I'm reading and taking this neurodegeneration course, getting more ideas about mitochondria, a longer list of supplements. I'm adding the supplements. And then nothing dramatic has happened yet. I'm still exhausted. I'm still having pain. I'm still, struggling with some brain fog. But then I began having this idea, I should take this list of things that I'm taking, figure out where they are in the food supply.
Interesting. What sprung that up? I mean, how did
I don't remember.
Yeah.
To be honest,
just occurred to you?
It's
basically?
I should figure out where it's in the food supply, and that if I did that, maybe I'm going to be picking up other things that are really good for me as well.
That's an interesting, matter of
a big
data, right? It's an insight.
Right.
I mean, saying it's not just an isolated supplement, but they are contained in food.
They're in food, and there's other stuff.
Yeah.
Probably important.
Yeah.
So I go talk to my dietitian friends. They have no idea. Then I go to the library. They don't really have any good idea. So I go back to Google, and I find the Linus Pauling Institute of Micronutrients. And so now I have a list of foodstuffs that I think are really important. And December 26th, I give Jackie this list of things that we're going to start eating. And 2 weeks later, I'm in the clinic. Well, maybe it's 3 weeks, and I start in the Trigeminal Neuralgia clinic. So the first week, I'm just there watching. And it's like that goes pretty easy, but of course it should because I didn't have to do anything. So now the second week, I'm examining these vets, and I'm going over in my wheelchair, and I get up and I do the exam, and I sit down and do all that stuff, and at the end of the week, I'm like, well, that really wasn't too bad. And then another week goes by, and I'm like, I can do this job. And now it's very clear that my fatigue, I'm not fatigued. And I'm realizing, my mental clarity is better. And I go next door to my office mate, and I says, I think I can do a deep knee bend. So I can't go all the way down, but I can go down, I can go back up. I said, I'm not sure how long it's been, but it's been a long time since I've done that. And then I go back to see my physical therapist, and I'm talking with him that I've been able to do the mat exercises better. So he has me start doing weight machines. He keeps adding weights. And of course, I didn't tell him how much E-stim I was doing because I was afraid he'd take my device away. But
Great doctor, bad patient.
yeah. So now I started doing a weight training program, and he kept advancing the weight. And it's like, wow, you are doing really well. It's in February, so now it's like 2.5 months of eating this new way. I'm still doing my supplements. I'm doing more E-stim because I keep adding more and more E-stim. I decided to walk down the hall and mail a letter. So people are seeing me for the first time in 4 years, like, oh my God, Dr. Walls, you're walking.
Wow.
But keep in mind, I had, as I'd gone downhill, come to terms with you just take each day as it unfolds. Here, everything is sort of regressing, but I'm still taking each day as it unfolds. I do not know what any of this means because I have a progressive disease, and you never recover from progressive MS.
It sounds like each time that there wasn't like you were recognizing progress, not because of, wow, suddenly something was shockingly different, but you tried little things. There's these gradual little areas of function that seem to return to you.
That were coming back. We're coming back.
Now, were you taking your supplements while you were getting these foods also?
So the sequence, have to remind everyone. So I did conventional drugs, steady downhill. I mean, and I love the paleo diet, but I have to be very clear. The paleo diet did not recover me. Supplements did not recover me. E-stim certainly helped my mood, and I'm sure accelerated my recovery. There's some magic about my reimagining my paleo diet in a very particular way. I also added in went back to meditating every day. And I was ramping up my exercise because, I was committed to doing this E-stim essentially all of my waking hours. So the speed of that year was just breathtaking. In the spring, I was due for my every couple year review with the chief of medicine over at the university. And while I was very comfortable walking around the VA, if I went over to the U, I was going to have to go down a hill, up a hill. It's probably about a half mile to get to his office. Like, oh, that's going to be too far, and I don't want to be late. So I had my scooter there, so I'll take that. So I get my scooter and I'm driving over. So I get out and I walk next to it, and I can get a few more feet, and then it's dead. And I'm like, oh. So I disengage the wheel and I push it up the rest of the hill.
So you're not just walking the hill; you're pushing your scooter.
Push my scooter up the hill, and then I get to the entrance, and they offer to call the patient mobile. It's like, okay, that'd be about half an hour. I'm like, oh my God, I'm already late. I said, no. So just keep on my scooter. So I walked up to the chair's office. The secretary was upset with me for being late. And I said, well, my scooter died. So she shoos me in and apologizes to Dr. Rothman, explained that my scooter died and that's why I was late. And he goes, well, so it probably took a while for the patient mobile to get to you. I said, well, actually, I didn't want to wait, so I just pushed it up the hill and I walked over. And he said, oh, so you must be on Tysabri. I said, well, no, actually, I'm not. So I explained my journey and the supplements and the diet and the E-stim. I showed him my device. And so he was very impressed. He said, this is like the best gift he could have gotten. And so he said, I want you to get a case report written up. And I'm like, on myself? Yeah. Work with your treating physician, your treating physical therapist. This is so remarkable. It really needs to be written up. So then once I got that written up, he called me back and said, now I want you to do a feasibility study.
Wow.
And I'm like, this is not my area of research. He goes, well, we'll get you some mentors. This is very important. So it took us about 1.5 years to write out the protocol, precisely enough what I was doing. And then I had to write some grants, secure some funding, and we got it underway.
Were you still taking medication, or you stopped the medications?
So when I started, I was still on the CellCept. I'm doing remarkably better. I call my neurologist to say, there's been a big change. I need to see you. So I get an appointment, I see his nurse coming out, walking around. I'm thinking, I bet she can't recognize me because I'm not in the wheelchair. So I stand up and say, hey, Cindy, over here. She goes, it's like, oh my God, Dr. Walls, you're walking. And my neurologist is so excited. He orders an MRI. Mm-hmm. We're both so disappointed that my MRI has not changed at all. Mm-hmm. But he says, clearly you are remyelinating, you're repairing your brain, you've created new pathways. I let him know that I want to discontinue the CellCept, and he's fine with it. Mm-hmm. So he has me tapered off over a 2-week period, and I'm off. And so that was at the beginning of April of 2008. And I've not been on any disease-modifying drugs since then.
So what year is it now when you had this meeting and then you saw your neurologist?
So that's 2008. Mm-hmm. So in 2007 is my nadir. Mm-hmm. I really begin in the fall of 2007 with the e-stim, more supplements. I changed my diet at the very end of 2008. In 2007, my physical therapist is putting me on a vigorous strength training program, and I'm really ramping up the e-stim. And the speed of my muscle improvements is remarkable. Now, I don't have a normal gait yet, but I'm comfortable walking throughout the neighborhood without a cane.
I certainly watched you walk right in here.
Yeah, I did
effortlessly.
Really, yeah. Now, but keep in mind, because I had come to terms and accepted that I had a progressive condition, that had gotten to the point where I just take every day as it unfolds, I'm having all this recovery. I'm just taking every day as it unfolds. And I remember in April talking to my wife, Jackie, that, do you think maybe someday I could bike again? She says, well, if things keep going the way they are, maybe in the fall we could try biking. Mm-hmm. A couple of weeks passed, and it's Mother's Day. Mm-hmm. I'm out in the garage, and I said, I'm gonna bike. So I start lowering the seat, put on the bike helmet. My kids hear me. They come out. They're really upset. They don't want me to bike. They're afraid. Jack comes out. We have an emergency family meeting. What Jack decides is Zach will run on the left. Zach will run on the right. She'll follow up on the bike behind. And I get on my bike, and I bike.
Wow.
And it was at that moment that I understood that I really was getting better. That who knew how much recovery might be possible. And it certainly felt miraculous then. As you could tell, it's a deeply emotional moment for me. So
now, between that point and today, are you still running your same protocols nutritionally?
Well, so between that day and now, I continue to read the research, read the literature. I've made many more refinements in terms of what we're doing, what we've observed clinically, what we're doing in our research. So the dietary protocol can be more nuanced for the individual and their if they're committed to being a vegetarian, for example, for their spiritual beliefs, or depending on their type of autoimmune disease, I'll have slightly different recommendations. I'm also been very interested in the work on ketosis, on intermittent fasting, on prolonged fasting, and I've incorporated fasting. I think there's a lot of benefit with hormesis, where we go through periods of fast, periods of a refeed where you have more protein in your diet, then back to a maintenance. So it's sort of a cycling in terms of dietary protocols. I keep reading the research. I keep trying to stay current in terms of what might be possible. It's a wonderfully exciting time.
It seems that you've got a new life's purpose as far as now saying, how can I get this out to other people?
Yeah, absolutely. Having MS, becoming profoundly disabled, having the horrific pain, having that profound level of disability, gave me the motivation to relearn all of this stuff. And then I really felt morally obligated to tell the world. I began teaching the public. It got me banned as a speaker by the MS Society because they were, concerned that I was creating false hope and that people would be rejecting FDA-approved drugs. Actually, that was probably good for me because then I had to meet with the chair of medicine and the chief of staff at the VA to explain why I was, what was going on, why are you a banned speaker. I had to review the science behind what I was doing. They both became huge fans and supported me in my research program. Then they also put me in connection with our complementary alternative medicine specialist at the university that guided me on how to talk about this, how to document it in the medical notes and the records so that I would not get myself at crosshairs with other physicians or with a peer review.
Were you expecting that, that your own profession would, at least dimensions of it would attack you?
Yes and no. I mean, one thing, in one sense, I'm sort of the perfect person for this, in that having grown up as a lesbian, gay person in small town Iowa, sort of dealt with the fact that, okay, I don't quite fit in, I got to pay attention to how I navigate the world. And I'm a little perhaps socially awkward. I'm much more introverted in my inner life. So the fact that what I was doing didn't fit in, that's been part of my experience for a long time. And the fact that I'm also quite comfortable with not fitting in.
Yeah.
All of it had to happen exactly the way it did for me to have the opportunity now to give the message that diet and lifestyle are why we become ill. Diet and lifestyle are how we become well.
Are there certain observations or things that you identified relative to, you talk about maybe which supplements you might be taking, but the source of the supplements or the quality of them or the manufacture of them, do those things come into play?
Supplements, yeah. There are several observations I have. One is my clinical practice at the VA. I couldn't do any fancy testing. I just did primary care labs. We couldn't do any fancy supplements. I could do vitamin D, fish oil, and B vitamins. Like that was it. And so I really had to work with very focused use of supplements and a lot of inspiration, instruction, motivation to get my vets to go on this journey with me. At first, I was really sort of annoyed that I was so restricted. But that ended up being a huge gift as well, because what I was able to see is I could get phenomenal results just with diet and lifestyle through this inspiration and motivation aspect. In my private practice, in my own personal experience, I do talk to people a lot about where we're getting our supplements, because many of our supplements are derived from genetically modified bacteria, or they're derived chemically. And so and if they're derived from genetically modified bacteria, how pure is that compound? And where is the compound manufactured? What kind of confidence do you have in terms of the purity standards if it's manufactured in China or Asia or Australia or Europe or the United States? And so I think supplements can be at times profoundly helpful, but you have to be very, very thoughtful about how you source them. And then the other thing, if you're using supplements, you have to be careful of is that for many of our nutrients, there's this U-shaped curve. If I'm too low, we'll say zinc, for example. If I'm too low in zinc, about 200 different enzymes in my brain are not working out very well. I start taking zinc. I feel great. I see big cognitive improvements. And so I've gone from deficiency into the therapeutic range where I've got great function. I keep taking that zinc. Now I have zinc excess, and I develop copper deficiency. And now I develop neurodegeneration. And I have the consequences of excess. And so when I use food, that's much safer. When you use supplements, they can be very helpful. But now it's a much more nuanced judgment. The quality of the supplement, And then you have to be very mindful of that big U-shaped curve where if you're low in that nutrient, yes, you want to fix that, but you have to be careful that you don't become toxic.
And the idea a therapeutic dose is one that's more than what might be considered a normal amount of intake
Right.
to try to make up for the deficiency.
To make up for the deficiency, and then you have to know when to stop it.
Yeah,
You can get yourself into mischief.
yeah.
Yes.
Know the source of where they come or what the purity standards are. It's sort of this difficult thing to do. If you're a
very
consumer at a store saying, "Hey, I'm going to read a label," but what does that really tell you?
Right, and then you'd also want to have third-party verification so that what is on the label matches what's inside. I've observed that some of my patients have adverse reactions to the binders that are used with supplements that make it easier to get the molecules to clump and flow nicely through the processing devices that get them into their little capsules. It can be a very complicated process.
Yeah,
That's why eating heart and liver, like man, are so good for us.
yeah. And then the foods, obviously, like you're saying, is you're not going to get therapeutic levels probably of supplements and foods, but you're getting, I guess, would be a natural level for your body.
You get a natural level, and have the associated compounds. So if I'm getting folate from the liver and from the greens, I'm getting many associated B vitamins with that in ratios that are biologically make sense. So food always should be primary. Very thoughtful use of supplements can be very, very helpful.
And I guess the same would hold true in foods, though, too. Do you recommend organic, non-GMO, et cetera?
So I'm mindful of meeting people with where they're at in terms of their financial and economic and social reality. The people that I took care of at the VA typically were on disability, on fixed incomes, living on food stamps. And I might be teaching them how to do the WALS protocol as a vegetarian to make it more economically sustainable. And then we talk about the Clean 15, the Dirty Dozen, and the advantage of organic foods, wild foods, foods out of their garden. And as people implement those concepts, the other thing I'd stress is the key thing is you got to cook.
Yeah.
You have to begin to cook at home. And then if you can afford it, yes, by all means, organic, wild-caught, free-range, fresh out of your garden or your neighbor's garden. And what is really remarkable, my vets living on food stamps began to figure out how to do this. My vets taught me that they could go to the farmer's market, walk around, figure out who was growing things organically, and then say, at the end of the market, what's the best price you could give me for everything you got left?
Yeah.
And so these guys could quite often manage to convert their diet to predominantly organic foods. But they didn't start with organic foods. They'd start with what they could get in small town Iowa, which might be a lot of canned vegetables and frozen vegetables.
Now you had a couple of rounds, with small groups of people in a research setting applying your protocol.
Yes.
And what did the results look like?
So the very first study that we did, we enrolled, we got 20 people with secondary and primary progressive MS who implemented the diet, targeted supplements. We had a stress reduction program, an exercise program, and we taught them how to use electrical stimulation of muscles. We had the largest reduction in fatigue severity that's been reported to date in the most disabled population. We got clinically meaningful and large improvements in quality of life, and half of those folks had clinically meaningful improvement in gait. We also had clinically meaningful improvement in verbal and nonverbal thinking, and improvements in mood with reduced anxiety and reduced depression. So that's a single-arm safety feasibility study. Next thing we did was we had 2 small randomized pilot studies where you were either randomized to a waitlist group or you got assigned to either a ketogenic diet or the original WALS diet. And we've written that stuff up. It's out under review. But again, very exciting results there. And we have another paper with weightless control and the Walls diet. And that's been published with, again, very, very favorable results with improvements in mood, quality of life, and motor function. The GATE paper that we have includes videos of the changes in the GATE. So very exciting stuff.
Have the skeptics, any of them started to come around a little bit, or are they trying to find things wrong with it?
Well, what I think is remarkable is we've had a bunch of philanthropic support, which allowed me to do all these small pilot studies. And as that pilot studies have gotten published and now are being cited by other researchers, that enabled me to write a competitive grant to the MS Society. They've given us over $1 million
Wow.
to do my current study comparing a low saturated fat diet to the Walls diet for its effect on fatigue and quality of life. And we're also added in poop collections. We're going to see how it affects the microbiome. And we've added in some measures to see how it affects visual function as well. That study will finish up in 2019, and we'll be doing the analyses in 2020. What was so remarkable is the speed of the transition from being sort of this eccentric oddity at the university to now being seen. I have a secondary appointment in neurology. I've been writing grants with my neurologic colleagues as co-investigators. I'm presenting at neurology. I'm doing grand rounds across the department. I'm traveling the country and the world talking about our research. The university's been getting cold calls of folks that are wanting to fund our research. We're raising money to do a very bold study where we'll take newly diagnosed MS patients who've declined drug therapy but want to have a therapeutic diet and lifestyle. And we'll follow them with MRIs and clinical exams and teach them our therapeutic lifestyle. And we'll have another cohort who will take drug therapy. We'll follow them with MRIs clinically. And the question is a therapeutic lifestyle equivalent in terms of being able to stabilize the disease as a drug? And what I think is remarkable is we will have to raise about $500,000 to do that. We've raised over $200,000. So I'm very optimistic that we can close that gap and answer that very important question. And the university is very excited about that possibility as well.
As they should be, but this is fairly radical stuff.
It's very radical.
And the subtext of it all is just this concept of hope. Like you said, when this diagnosis comes, it's sort of this protracted death sentence, right?
Now people say you take these biologic drugs, $50,000 to $100,000 a year, we can slow your progression, and you don't have to have terrible things happen. And that may be true. Whenever you have potent immune suppression, though, you're interfering with the cells that maintain, repair you, protect you from infection, protect you from cancers. And so there's going to be some serious side effects. What if we can do just as well with a therapeutic lifestyle?
Or better?
Well, that would be a separate question. That's a separate statistical question.
Right.
The first question is we have to show that there's no harm. And then when I can show that there's no harm, then I can set up an experiment that says, which is better?
Yeah, I mean, just look at the goals, though, and the intent. Because on one side, it's just saying, we're just going to try to slow this down, so I can extend my life or extend my functionality. No real speaking of healing, repair, or regression of the disease.
That would be the huge question. What would those structural MRIs show?
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is an interesting thing, too, then, because in one respect, if you're looking at MRIs and saying that is, basically the criteria from which we determine efficacy, that's not the same thing because in your case, the MRIs look the same,
That's
but
right.
your functionality in life is what matters.
Yes. And so we'll also be monitoring disability status scores. And we'll have this very sophisticated visual function, the ocular coherence tomography, that really looks at the optic nerves and the retina. And we'll look at flicker fusion, which looks at the optic nerve. So we're going to have some very, very precise measures of function.
Yeah.
And precise measures of structure over time, therapeutic lifestyle, drug treatment. And I'm very optimistic that we'll finish raising our funds, close that gap, and I'm planning that we'll be able to start that study next year.
It's very exciting. We spoke about dieting, we spoke about supplementation and electric stim, et cetera, as a part of your protocols. But you also mentioned something else that we didn't really dig into, and that was meditation.
Yeah.
What role did that play?
During college, I learned how to do Transcendental Meditation and did that regularly through college. And sometime during medical school, I stopped. I no longer recall why. That when I became ill with the multiple sclerosis, I did see that stress made it worse. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I didn't go back to meditation. I certainly should have. But that summer of 2007, when I was like, okay, I got to do everything I possibly can, mm-hmm. I went back to doing some mantra-based meditations and some breathwork meditations as mm-hmm. well. I've continued doing a variety of meditative type practices, mm-hmm. Including TM, including 4-7-8 breath work, including gratitude journals.
Nice.
I've also started doing some parasympathetic work with E-stim as well. So in my research protocols, we do talk about the critical role for doing a stress-reducing practice.
So it's interesting because it's a mind. There's a mind-body influence, isn't there?
Yes,
I mean, it's not just a matter of saying we can biologically and physiologically do certain things, but the mind plays a role in healing.
Well, absolutely. If we don't do some part of that, something that's stress-reducing practice, we don't give the signal of safety to ourselves, which has some subtle changes in a hormonal signaling that shifts cellular function to maintenance and repair. Mm-hmm. And if we don't have that maintenance and repair time, that, of course, leads to accumulated damage.
Well, I want to just first say I think it's an incredible story, an incredible journey, and it has meaning for a great many people, not just the people afflicted, but the people that are in their lives, their loved ones around them, of course, as you know firsthand, is also impacted. Yeah. And the prospect of supplementation, of diet, literally having a profound life impact, on individuals and their loved ones. This is really significant work, a significant purpose. So I appreciate you sharing it with us.
It's hard to sleep at night. Life is so exciting. I mean, there's so much hope, so much possibility. I have to spend more time meditating to quiet my mind and get ready to sleep.
Thank goodness for you and the fact that you have this level of excitement, and I wish for you to maintain that. So thank you very much for taking time to sit and speak with us.
Thank you.
As much as I love academics and research to learn and to know what to do, nothing is more powerful than a personal story that tells you what hope there is for human beings and what possibilities exist for all of us. Thanks for letting me share this story with you. After Ben Greenfield was born, they broke the mold. Ben is a completely unique and inspiring human being who is a fitness expert and biohacker. He is a nerd. He studies constantly, but he's also an Adonis if you look at him, the way he's built, the type of races that he enters, how he performs personally on a high level, and then how he inspires others to do the same. He's a unique individual with a lot of context. You can't help but be inspired and motivated when you listen to him. So lean in and enjoy this interview with Ben Greenfield. Ben, thank you for joining us. I'm very excited to talk to you. You have a lot of experience from a practical user standpoint. You know just about everybody in this industry. So I'm really excited to talk to you today.
I've taken a lot of supplements, and full disclosure, I make supplements. I help companies design supplements. I've been kind of immersed in the supplement industry ever since I was a fledgling bodybuilder, sucking down creatine shakes every day and giant cans of chemical infused protein. And I've learned a lot along the ways. But yes, I certainly have been a fan of or a user of or studied up on supplements for a while.
So let's get a little bit of your background. What brought you here and where did you come from?
Yeah, I studied exercise physiology and biomechanics at University of Idaho, and I was actually very interested in nutrition even back then, meaning that I took a lot of coursework in advanced human nutrition and in pharmacology. I had a keen interest in biochemistry and how a lot of these molecules actually interact with the body. And so most of my background in terms of working with supplements has been helping people out by reviewing their blood, their biomarkers, their urine, their stool, their saliva, and trying to make customized supplement recommendations for them based on whatever, sleep, gut, performance, whatever it is that they're going after. But ultimately, my background and where I initially learned most of what I know in order to be able to analyze whether a supplement is good or bad or whether someone needs it was just my initial coursework in nutrition and pharmacology at Idaho.
So you're a competitive athlete and you utilize the benefits of supplements for your competitions. Are these also useful for normal people?
When it comes to athletes, which I would include in the athlete category, the people rolling out of bed to do a CrossFit WOD in the morning and then maybe hitting the hot yoga session or something like that in the afternoon and leading physically active lifestyles, I definitely think a case can be made for supplementation. In the case of an athlete, for example, you really do need to eat a massive number of calories to get the magnesium and the vitamin B12 and the creatine and the nitric oxide precursors and a lot of these things that are either well studied and known to either enhance recovery or to act as kind of like ergogenic aids for performance. So as an athlete, it can be difficult on the gut. And I found this when I was racing Ironman triathlon. At that time, I didn't have a lot of money to buy supplements, but I would have to just make elaborate meals. And I was always hunched over the Vitamix and, and the blender and trying to figure out how I can get as many dense calories into my body for nutrients as possible. When in fact, you can cover a lot of those bases with things like, a good multivitamin and a mineral complex and many of these things that we know athletes are turning over at a pretty high pace. So for athletes, it just kind of reduces the need to just stuff your face all the time with calories. It's like there are some days, and we even know this from an inflammation and accelerated mTOR standpoint, a lot of the things that can affect longevity, an athlete could eat a giant ribeye steak every day to get, creatine and protein, but there are some issues if you're just eating excess calories and excess meat all the time, or you could supplement with creatine or small amounts of like a protein blend or amino acids or something that would kind of fill in the gaps. When it comes to the general population who aren't exercising heavily, then the question becomes, well, I'm not burning through a lot of calories, I'm not burning through a lot of nutrients, maybe I'm not sweating out as many minerals, maybe I'm not losing as many of these compounds, and maybe I don't have a goal to be able to run faster, I don't need an ergogenic aid for physical performance. Well, there are still some things that I think you have to tackle when it comes to taking care of your body. For example, we know that soil tends to be more depleted these days, particularly in a lot of the minerals. And so many people are deficient in magnesium, for example, or potassium. And if you're eating organic food that's been well composted in mineral-rich soil, you probably don't need to worry about that. But if you aren't, that might be a gap that you need to fill. Another issue is that we are, in our day and age, fighting a constant battle in this post-industrial era against everything from toxins and heavy metals that might require some kind of a detoxification supplement at some point in one's life, to electromagnetic fields and cell phones and Wi-Fi radiation and a constant bombarding with things that cause inflammation or oxidation. So maybe in addition to our blueberries and our salad, consuming a whole spectrum antioxidant, on the days that we're doing hefty amounts of travel, or using something like glutathione or vitamin C or vitamin E or things that help to support natural antioxidant response would be smart for someone. Another example would be the immune system. right? You could certainly argue that our ancestors would have supplemented in certain ways, maybe with mortar and pestle or with oil extracts or with methods that are different than the encapsulation or the liposomal technology that we use these days. But if someone were sick, they would have gone out and found Oregon grapefruit, right, and dug it up and taken the root and shaved that and made it into a tea or made it into a tincture, to help out with the immune system. And nowadays, we can go to Amazon and we can buy, echinacea tincture or berberine or golden seal or any of these other things that help to support the immune system in a very similar way as our ancestors would have done while being out plant foraging. And so, yes, for athletes who need a lot of extra nutrient help without who don't have the ability or can't or don't want to or don't have the gut capability to be able to eat copious amounts of calories every day, that's a group that would benefit from supplementation. People who aren't eating organic, well-composted, mineral-rich produce from really good soil, those are people who might benefit from multivitamins and minerals. People who are up against a sickness or an illness, or your kids came home from school, and the flu's going around, those are people who might benefit from supplementation with immune support. And then people who are simply living a post-industrial lifestyle, right? You're not living on a pristine Himalayan mountaintop, and your body has a lot of inflammation and oxidation that occurs. And yes, there are natural food compounds, like blueberries and dark chocolate and red wine and dark leafy greens and all sorts of things that have antioxidants and anti-inflammatories in them. But there are some situations in which, let's take the sulforaphane from broccoli, right? We know that's incredible as an anti-inflammatory for the gut, but to get a really good hefty dose of it, you got to eat like a huge stock of broccoli. So why not just take an isolated sulforaphane extract if you've got some gut inflammation that needs to subside, so that you don't have to eat a whole mixing bowl full of broccoli.
Just for fun, I know that you recommended bitter melon for me for a specific purpose.
Right.
Are there 5 or 6 other supplements that are favorites of yours that work for specific things?
It's kind of funny because I'll have friends over to my house and I'll open the refrigerator, right? And there's all the supplement bottles in the side door of the refrigerator. We'll go in the pantry and, next to the sardines and the rice and the lentils, there's 20 different bottles of all these different supplements or tubs or canisters or oils or tinctures. And one of the first things people ask me is, how do you take all of that every day? And the answer is I don't, right? Just like when you open my refrigerator and you see kale and blueberries and bone broth and chia seeds and last night's leftovers and half of a turkey leg, that doesn't mean there's a requirement for me to eat all of those things every single day. I fuel my body with the food in my refrigerator as is necessary. Maybe I'll have the coconut water after a workout where I've sweated a lot, and maybe I'll start off my day with a smoothie from the greens, and maybe I'll have some of that turkey at night, or maybe it's the next day that I have that because that's the day I had a hard weightlifting workout and I need extra protein. You could say the same for supplements, right? I've got probiotics, but I've got lots of fermented foods at home too. Kimchi and sauerkraut and yogurt. But when I travel, it's hard for me to find really good, clean, organic fermented food. So I throw the probiotic in my travel bag and I supplement with the probiotic. Or if I've had a tough workout or a very stressful day, I know there's not a lot of blood flow to my gut. We've got company over for dinner. My wife's made a fantastic meal. Well, I'll take digestive enzymes in a situation like that. I had gluten digestive enzymes last night because I was at a restaurant with a lot of people. It was a steakhouse. They brought bread out to the table. I wanted to have some, so I had some gluten digesting enzymes to help with that. But it's not like I'm taking that breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There are certain things, however, that I do think people would benefit from using almost every day based on the research that are behind them. One would be creatine. Flies under the radar. A lot of people think it's for strength or power athletes or bodybuilders, but as a nootropic, as a way to increase your memory, your word recall, your cognition, as a way to stave off what's called sarcopenia, the natural muscle loss with age, that's something that has profound benefits when just taken daily, year-round. So creatine is one. I am also a fan of some type of multivitamin or mineral complex, like a good multivitamin that's just kind of covering your bases, again, especially when you travel, right? Like if I'm in Las Vegas, which is a grocery store oasis, I'm not getting a lot of fresh food. In many cases, the only real food I'll eat might be with the meal at night, and even then the quality of that food would be questionable. I'll use a multivitamin or a mineral complex in a case such as that. So I take a multivitamin, I take creatine. The data behind fish oil is very strong. Some type of omega-3 fatty acid supplementation, or what's called parent essential oil supplementation, giving your body what it needs to repair the cell membranes that are beat up in many cases from a lot of the, the industry, the oxidation, the Wi-Fi, the Bluetooth, everything else we're bombarded with. Omega-3 fatty acids, I think, are also very helpful. So creatine, multivitamin, fish oil. Probably the only other things that I take regularly would be some kind of bitter or digestif to enhance my insulin response to a meal, because as an athlete, I'm refilling carbohydrate stores at the end of the day. Many people want to reduce their blood sugar response to a meal, so I'll use something like berberine or bitter melon extract or one of these blood sugar stabilizers before I eat a big dinner. And I do that just about every day. I'll have, in my case, a couple capsules of bitter melon extract before I have my evening meal. And then the last thing, and again, if your vitamin D is low, you take vitamin D. If your magnesium is low, you take magnesium. But the only other thing that I consume regularly that I like quite a bit for relaxation, for sleep, I live a hard charging lifestyle, and that would be something from the endocannabinoid family, like a CBD or some type of CBD extract or hemp extract or analog of hemp. I think that's very useful as well. So for me personally, creatine, fish oil, multivitamin, some kind of digestive support, and some kind of sleep support like CBD.
As you've designed supplements and know a lot of the manufacturers, how do I as a consumer know that what I am getting is what I'm hoping for?
There's a lot of things you can look for when you're purchasing a supplement, but a few biggies. One would be that it's produced in what's called a CGMP, Certified Good Manufacturing Practices facility. That will be displayed on the bottle, and it's more of a guarantee that you're not going to be consuming things that wound up being contaminated in the factory or in the manufacturing facility where the supplement was made. So you need something that's CGMP certified. If you're an athlete, I actually think you should take things one step further and look for things that are either NSF or TGE certified. TGE is out of Australia, NSF is in the US, and these are third-party bodies that will ensure that a supplement is not going to have things that might get you kicked out of your sport, or not be able to pass a urine test because you're doping. For example, there was a controversy sometime back where a certain manufacturer had salt capsules, electrolyte capsules, and they actually had small amounts of steroidal precursor in them. And so the athlete thought they were just taking minerals and electrolytes during their sport, and they were taking steroids, and they got banned from competition for several years. So if you're an athlete, you look for NSF or TGE. Now, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be worried about steroids in your supplement, but as an athlete, you need to take things to the next level and be even more careful. But general population, at least look for CGMP. And then, you can look for added fillers, things that don't need to be in there, especially when it comes to chemical additives. If it has sucralose, acesulfame potassium, red and blue colorings, additives, chemicals, I generally avoid it, because to me, it's just a red flag that whoever made that supplement was not really thinking from a holistic standpoint with someone's overall health in mind. If they're willing to put a lot of cheap fillers or chemicals or preservatives or sweeteners that aren't natural into the compound. And then the other thing that I look for, in addition to just added chemicals that don't need to be in there, is the composition of the supplement itself. Like, let's say a multivitamin, for example. We know that vitamin D, excess vitamin D, can increase your risk of arterial calcification if it's not absorbed properly. But a lot of supplement manufacturers will produce supplements with multivitamins in particular, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 units of vitamin D. But if you don't have vitamin K, K2 particularly, 100 to 200 micrograms of vitamin K, and some amount of magnesium, at least 100 milligrams of magnesium, you're not going to absorb the vitamin D properly. So if I look at a vitamin supplement that doesn't have minerals like magnesium, and it doesn't have vitamin K2, but it's got a bunch of vitamin D, I know that whoever made it didn't really know what they were doing. The same could be said for folic acid. We know that folic acid, especially synthetic folic acid, can actually cause inflammation. It can result in the formation of excess homocysteine, which is a cardiovascular risk factor. And when you look at a multivitamin, again, it just says folic acid. That's a sign that manufacturer did not know what they were doing, or could have used a more bioavailable source of folate, like methyl tetrahydrofolate, MTHF. You want to look for something like that on the label. I realize the average person is not necessarily going to know that when they're looking at the label of a supplement and be able to tear it down and reverse engineer it. But if you're not able to do that, you need to go to a website like LabDoor, for example, that examines supplements, or you go to a website like examine.com to see if the ingredients in there are actually efficacious or in the correct form, or you have a good nutritionist or someone you can speak to, like a functional medicine practitioner, who's able to tell you, well, this chemical is good, this one is not. So there's a lot of things to take into consideration when you're choosing a supplement. The last caution I would give to people is don't assume that because it helped your next door neighbor out that it's what you need to be taking, right? Like if they feel like magnesium changed their lives, well, if you go out and you take a magnesium test and what are called your RBC magnesium levels are just fine, maybe you have no need to throw extra magnesium into your mix, and that would be a waste of money for you, or you might actually wind up getting gut distress from too much magnesium. And the same could be said for vitamin D, right? Like if you test for vitamin D and your levels are between 40 and 80, that's a pretty good sign that you don't need to be taking it. If they're above 80, you could risk calcification if you take vitamin D, and maybe it's working fantastically for your neighbor. Maybe they don't have the gene responsible for getting vitamin D from sunlight. That's a thing. But maybe you do, and you're out in the sun, so you don't need to take vitamin D. So there's a great deal of customization and personalization that can be done as well in the world of supplementation.
That's great. Thank you. So wrapping up, tell me now what you're personally developing and what I should be looking out for.
When I look at a lot of supplement companies, they have many, many formulas. You look at whatever, Designs for Health or Douglas Laboratories or Thorne or any of these big supplement manufacturers. You can get vitamin K, you can get vitamin K with vitamin D, you can get probiotics, you can get probiotics with enzymes, you can get the multivitamin, you can get the multivitamin with curcumin. There's hundreds of SKUs. It's dizzying. The only thing that I'm doing right now is I am taking any of the kind of the time-honored herbs and what you might call ancestral medicine, right? Bitter melon extract and rock lotus and berberine and all sorts of different herbal complexes. Turmeric is another perfect example. And I want to take those and combine them with more modern scientific molecules that have been formulated. Creatine, pre-digested amino acids, ATP, HMB, CBD, a lot of these things that are isolated molecules that our ancestors might not have had access to, and combining those to create flagship formulas. So I'm only going to have going forward with my company, 6 to 7 different formulas, right? One for immune, one for joint, one for gut, one for hormones, one for longevity, one for sleep. I'll probably do one for fasting and spiritual health and focus, almost like a kind of spiritual nootropic, and that's it. And so I'm just pouring a lot of my energy, my research, my time into manufacturing just a few key supplements that cover a lot of bases for people, so that ultimately, in an ideal scenario, you only need to take, you might have 6 or 7 bottles of supplements that you own. And then finally, I'm paying close attention to artificial intelligence, to self-quantification, and to the ability to be able to make targeted supplement recommendations based off exactly what someone's blood work looks like. So yes, maybe you take a few flagship formulas, but then I would make recommendations you to go to Thorne or Douglas Laboratories or any of these other websites and actually get the little things that could fill in the holes for you based on your blood work or your biomarkers or your data. And I think that eventually artificial intelligence will be able to do all that for us. Look at your blood work, look at your urine, your stool, your saliva, and say, hey, here are the 8 supplements that you need to be taking.
Thanks, great, Ben. Thanks so much for taking the time and telling us what you're doing.
Thanks, man.
What an amazing character Ben Greenfield is. He inspires me every time I'm around him, read him, watch his blog, or do any of the things that he's involved in. Thanks for letting us share this interview with you. The world of supplementation and nutrition has a lot of dimensions to it, but one undeniable dimension is it's a business. So understanding the business tells you a lot about this industry. In this next interview, Tom Arts, who is the founder of the Nutrition Business Journal, shares his expertise, wisdom, and experience over many years of being in this industry, and you're going to learn a lot from it. Tune in. Tom, thanks so much for being with us. You have a big name in the supplement industry, so tell us how that happened and give us some of your history in the supplement industry.
Thank you, and I'm really glad to be here with you, Patrick. I've been fortunate in my career. I found my passion, which is nutrition, and I found it in my mid to late 20s when I was an athlete, and I started to take some supplements, some sports nutrition supplements that really made a difference to my athletic performance. And then I went off to business school and did all those things to build my career, and I realized that I wanted to mix my passion with my business skills. And so I ended up publishing a newsletter called Nutrition Business Journal, which was kind of the Wall Street Journal of the nutrition space, and we became sort of instant experts on tracking the entire nutrition industry. So I was fortunate enough to be the publisher and the editor and the creator and founder of this journal, which allowed us to see everything happening in the industry, whether it was the hottest new trends or whether it was the hottest new companies or whether it was new product developments that were happening or consumer trends. All those things we were tracking on a monthly and weekly basis, and we came up with all kinds of research that all the leaders of the industry started to read. So that's how I got my start in this really interesting industry.
Okay, take us from there and let's just follow your career for a minute. You're running the Nutrition Business Journal. It's given you access to what's going on behind the scenes. So take us from there to now and what you've learned along the way.
Sure. So the journal that I started, Nutrition Business Journal, was a way to see everything happening. And then I eventually sold it to a company called New Hope, which owns all the big trade shows in the industry. So I sort of stayed around the center of the industry and started to do more work on an advisory capacity with a lot of the leaders of the industry. And then I also got really interested in working with entrepreneurs. And so we started a Shark Tank business. I'm a serial entrepreneur, in case you can't tell. And we started a sort of a network company called Nutrition Capital Network, where we put companies together with capital. And we help them sort of grow their businesses by helping them find sources of capital, and acted sort of like pretty much a network and a connector. I've been known throughout the industry as sort of the most connected guy in the industry, or some people even have called me the human LinkedIn of the industry. I'm not sure that's a good or bad title, but I pretty much know where all the bodies are buried and know where the good companies are and where everything's headed. So my advisory work on top of the journal, on top of this work I do with entrepreneurs, has really allowed me to kind of see all the things going on, and that's why I'm lucky enough to kind of understand where I think the industry is going.
Obviously, as a business person and an entrepreneur, I'm certainly interested in talking to you, but the real reason I want to talk to you today is because of your unique vantage point and your view of the entire industry. You know things about the supplement industry that the average person will never know, both good and bad. So first, make your case for supplements from your standpoint and why anyone should care.
So I get this question all the time, Patrick. It's the question I get when I travel a lot, because I travel a lot and go to a lot of trade shows to try to keep up on all the trends. And I sometimes talk to people in my travels and along the way. And the question I get when I say I'm in the nutrition business, and particularly I'm an expert in supplements, they always ask me, like, well, two questions. Do I really need supplements? Can I just get all those nutrients from my food? And then if I am going to take supplements, which ones should I take and why? So that, by far, those two questions are the questions I get. I've gotten hundreds, if not thousands of times. And my answer has changed a little bit as I've learned more about the industry. But the case for supplements is, in my experience, pretty simple. We are not eating the same foods we ate years and years ago because the soil is not as good. And so if the soil is not as good, the food nutrients are not as good. So almost everybody recognizes that the food supply has less nutrients in it. There's lots of specific examples around that, but you're not getting as the same levels of magnesium. You're not getting the same levels of vitamin D as you were from 15, 20, 30, 40 years ago, our parents and our grandparents. That means that unless you eat a perfect diet, you're not going to get the nutrients you need. And today, it's much harder to eat a perfect diet. The second thing that's going on in our world, and nobody denies this, is there's increased toxicity. So today, the water isn't as clean, the air isn't as clean. We are breathing toxins. There are toxins all around us. The toxin load in the environment is much higher. And whether it's mercury or whether it's other pollutants, there's ways to protect your body from those pollutants. And I believe it's from nutrients, and you need more than just what you can get from food. So my simple reasoning is supplements are like cheap health insurance. So even if you pee some of them out, which is what people say, I say, why not take them? Because the chance that they're going to get into your system and help you is going to make a big difference. So in many of the doctors and scientists I've known over the years say, if you could eat a perfect diet, 7 servings of fruits and vegetables, 7 servings of fatty fish to get your omega-3s. If you could do all that perfectly every week, you might get enough nutrients. You might not need a supplement, but nobody does that. And it's extremely hard with our lifestyles today to eat that kind of diet and consistently get those nutrients into your system. So we know we need the nutrients. So I say, why not buy some good supplements that are high quality, that add to your diet deficiencies, which we're all deficient in, and just give you that extra level of nutrients that you need to stay younger, feel better, have more energy, feel healthier, and prevent disease. One other point about the case for supplements is my favorite case for supplements is vitamin D. Vitamin D wasn't really well known that we needed certain levels of it. And there's still controversy about what's optimal levels. But even vitamin D, when I live in San Diego, and there's people walking around San Diego saying, oh, you get vitamin D from the sun. And you do. And you need to be in the sun a certain amount of time every day. I think it's like 20 to 30 minutes. I'm not sure the exact time to get enough minimal levels of vitamin D. But even that, is difficult with that we work inside and we wear sunscreen, and it's difficult to get the optimal levels of vitamin D. So a lot of people say, well, there's the minimum levels, and then there's the levels that are healthy, and then there's the optimal levels. I'm a believer that we should shoot for the optimal levels, and I know that people are walking around deficient in vitamin D. Mm-hmm. I know that 70% of the population in the U.S. is walking around deficient in magnesium for a lot of reasons. And so I believe that those supplements, whether you buy the highest quality or not, those are the basic ones that if you might need it, I might need it, but I think almost everybody should take some basic nutrients as sort of, again, a buffer against all these problems you might have as you get older. And I believe that's what I call cheap health insurance.
So normally we would avoid trying to name specific companies as we're going through our exploration here, but because of your unique vantage point, I want to violate that a little bit and ask you to go ahead and name some companies that you think are really good.
So I get that question all the time because I take over 25 supplements a day and try to support our industry. But I also believe that, and I don't take the same ones, every month. I switch some of them out, but that's about the number. People say, well, what are the best supplement companies? And I get that question all the time. I don't want to point out any particular companies. I'm happy to share some of the companies I take and why I take them. But in general, the rule of thumb is, I always say, avoid products that are too inexpensive. And what I mean by that is if you go to the mass market shelf and you buy a multivitamin and it's $7 or $8, right? I'm not saying that's not going to have some nutrients in it, but I always say it's your health, it's your body. You're much better off probably going to a natural food store like a Whole Foods or a Sprouts, where you're going to buy a higher quality multivitamin, and you might pay a little bit more for it, in some cases a lot more, but sometimes that extra money you pay is for a higher quality product. Sometimes it's not, but you need to look at the labels, see if there's high quality nutrients in there. I particularly like whole food-based supplements. I think they absorb better as opposed to synthetic supplements. I don't like a lot of excipients in my supplements, which are all the binders and all those things that are in those tablets. I'm more of a capsule guy or a powder guy than I am just a bunch of tablets, because I think those excipients are just extra things your body doesn't need. Mm-hmm. So those are sort of the general rules. And then if you want to get more specific about companies, I particularly like the practitioner companies. The practitioner companies are those that sell through whether it's medical doctors or chiropractors or alternative integrative medicine doctors. There's a lot of companies that make products for those doctors. And in general, those products are oftentimes made at higher quality levels with higher quality standards of manufacturing. Again, there are other companies that make really good products as well, but if you're just looking for a general rule of thumb, if you can buy a product from companies like Designs for Health or Metagenics or Orthomolecular, those are usually higher quality products. You can't go wrong. You might pay a little more, but your health is worth it.
With those companies, because they know they're going to get some scrutiny from the practitioner, do they hold themselves to a higher standard?
Yes, that's part of it. They know they're selling through practitioners, and the practitioners have their reputations on the line, so they know that they need to make high-quality products for them. Oftentimes, these companies are started by practitioners, right? So you'll have companies where there was a practitioner and they wanted to start a line of supplements. So they already had an idea of, I can make a higher quality supplement, maybe a more potent product that has higher efficacy and higher scientific standards. So they're a physician or sometimes a practitioner starting a company to make the supplements. So they're going to have higher standards to begin with. But the other reason is exactly correct. If you're going to go through a doctor, the doctor is going to scrutinize that product, and they're going to make a higher quality product for the practitioner to sell to their patient.
I really want to hit this harder in fairness to the person who's watching this. There's different business models. You can have people who manufacture a Mercedes and people that manufacture a Kia, and they are approaching two different market segments. Some are high end, some are the lower end. Likewise, with supplements, you have very high premium grade supplements that also you pay more for, but at the same time, you also have more discounted supplements or supplements that are cheaper. They're using cheaper ingredients. So we really have to understand that both of these things exist. These different business models are within the same industry.
So yes, there are different business models in our industry, and there are companies that, if you're buying a Ford Escort or you're buying a Mercedes or a Tesla, those are different, premium products versus more basic products. And even in shoes, we might buy a pair of sneakers that cost $19.99 or $29.99 all the way up to, the pair of high quality Nikes endorsed by the famous basketball player, and they're going to be $149. Same with shoes. So in our industry, that is also the case. So I'm not saying that you can't buy a decent product at a Walgreens or a mass market store. I think you can. I just think you have to be more scrutinizing about that product and what you're trying to do with the product. So, for example, if you're buying a basic product like a vitamin D or a magnesium or even a vitamin C product, you can get usually a pretty good quality product because it's a commodity type product, right? Even fish oil. I buy my fish oil at Costco because I know where that product is made and who makes it, and I know the quality is the same as if I'm going to go pay twice as much at Whole Foods, right? So you have to kind of know that, and I know that, and there's ways to kind of do some research on that. So I'm not saying you can't buy a decent bottle of products at a store. You just ought to know where the product came from. And these days, a lot of companies are starting to get more transparent about their sources of the raw materials and where these raw materials came from. And they're starting to, I know one company that's selling fish oil where there's a QR code on the label, and you could put your phone on the QR code and see the boat from a satellite where that fish oil is from up in the Bering Sea in Alaska. So now you know that that product is made there. Or another company out of New Hampshire selling turmeric, and you could go on their website and you can see the farm where the turmeric was made, and there's a camera inside the manufacturing facility seeing where the turmeric's made and where it came from. That's the kind of transparency sourcing that I think we need in our industry to help consumers and also help our industry.
From where you sat over time in your role in the industry, you've had the opportunity to see a lot of trends come and go. Right now, the biggest thing that seems to be happening right now is CBD. So can you give me some of your own perspectives and comments on the CBD industry?
So every year, because I chair the MBJ CEO Summit, I have a lot of communication with a lot of the CEOs in the industry. So every year I do a Christmas letter on some of the hot trends and topics going on in our industry. And this year, I decided to dedicate my letter to CBD. The reason I did is because actually I was wrong on CBD. I get paid to predict the future. On this one, I didn't quite see it happening as fast as it did. I thought CBD was going to be a real product. Scientifically, I think it's got a lot of merit. But I never saw this amount of demand and interest in this ingredient that I've never seen, since the days that we used to have some of our blockbuster ingredients, even back to ephedra, which had some issues, of course. But CBD is an ingredient that is taking off like a rocket. And this year, the growth rate is, 5 times the growth rate of the industry. It's still small relative to other ingredients, but I think in the next 2 to 3 years, it's going to become a blockbuster ingredient, despite the fact that it's not officially legal as a dietary supplement. So just in December of 2018, just recently, the Farm Bill passed the Senate, the Congress, and the President's been sort of approved. That will actually lead to some kind of rationalization for CBD not being a product that is not legal in the marketplace. It's still technically illegal for the FDA to call it a supplement, but at the same time we have hundreds of companies selling CBD. We've got public companies raising hundreds of millions of dollars. It's legal in Canada right now. Marijuana is being legalized, which is different than CBD. So we have a product that's exploding. I always say the toothpaste is out of the tube. You can't put it back in. And I think that in this case, the market is going to lead the regulation. It's usually the regulation controlling the market, but in this case, I think the regulation is going to have to catch up. I think the FDA is going to have to find a way to allow CBD to be on the market because they can't get it off because they don't even have the resources to do that. And I think it's going to be a big blockbuster product.
Is the product as good as the hype? Is the market racing ahead?
Well, our industry has a problem with hype. When something is hot, we get people selling it out of their basements. The barriers to entry in our industry, I say, it's like the best thing about our industry is the barriers to entry are low. That's a business term for meaning anybody can get in the business. And the worst thing about our industry is the barriers to entry are too low. So that you, Patrick, or me could go in our basement and we could start, whipping up some CBD and we can get it on the line and we can sell it on the internet. That is not necessarily a good thing. And so what we've got going on now in CBD, which is equivalent to what's going on in the industry, is we've got a lot of people making a lot of claims about products that are probably not correct and in some cases even fraudulent. And I think this is a problem because we just don't have good self-regulation. And I think the CBD industry and the supplement industry need to really be aware of this because we can ruin a big opportunity for ourselves. So to answer your question bluntly, no, the hype is way beyond what some of the products deliver. There are some great CBD products, but we don't have enough science yet to know what's the right dosage for CBD. What is the right condition that you should take CBD for? Where is the science for CBD? It's not there yet. It's coming, but since it's been illegal according to FDA, nobody wants to come forward with any science. But there is science, and the science will be most likely around pain, probably sleep. I know people are making CBD skincare products for pain and getting some really, really good anecdotal results. I think there's some very good science that's going to come down the pike for pain. And as that science gets developed and the dosages get figured out, then the industry needs to make sure that they're providing quality products that have the right dosage of ingredients in them, that they say what's on the label is inside the bottle, that they make the right claims, that the product is efficacious, that the product is safe. We call this amongst the leaders in the industry the product promise. Just like you buy a pair of shoes, they're going to be high quality. You should buy a supplement and it should be exactly what's on the bottles in the label. And that's where CBD needs to catch up and make sure that they're meeting those conditions for the consumer. And then we're going to have a great experience with this ingredient.
I'm curious, so knowing how much you know and the fact that you take 25 supplements a day, what do you take and what about personalized nutrition?
So those two questions are a little bit connected because for years I used to take supplements based on the promise of what I thought those ingredients could do for me. Remember when I started in sports, I needed more muscle energy and I needed more energy on the slopes and skiing. And I used to take supplements to help me with my athletic performance. As I got older, I started, sort of buying into some of the science and taking basic products. And, fish oil was sort of one of my early products I took. And I started to take a really good solid multivitamin. Then I got into really looking at some of the minerals that I was lacking. One of the first minerals I started taking that I think made a big difference to me was chromium. And then I took magnesium. I realized that as an athlete, I was constantly deficient in magnesium. And so I just took magnesium because it helped with everything, less injuries, better sleep. It's one of those basic component products. I've talked to a lot of practitioners, and they say that one of the first things they do is they ask people, how much magnesium are you getting? Later on, I even started to look at my protein. I believe that a lot of people are deficient in protein, and I wanted to take the right kind of protein. So I make a shake every morning, and I guess I take 25 supplements, but I also I forgot all the powders I take in the morning. So I'll take a protein powder. I'll add maca to it because I think maca is a really good herb for energy. It's got some adaptogenic impacts. I'll take ashwagandha as well, which I think is a really good adaptogenic product. I'll add in some fiber that I always take. So I'll add some chia seed in there. Some probiotics are really important, and I think that's very important for your gut and your microbiome. And then I also take coenzyme Q10, and lately there's some new versions of coenzyme Q10 I've taken. One of my new favorite products is Niagen, which is a certain form of vitamin B, and it's really good for your NAD levels, which is sort of an anti-aging mechanism in your body. Yeah, I could go on and on, but those are the basic ones. If somebody asks me, where do I start, because they get a big headache because I just went through this list, I say, start with some basics. Get a really good whole foods multivitamin. Look at your fiber levels and see if you could take some fiber in the form of a pre-product and a probiotic, because then you can get both the pre and the pro. You might want to take fish oil, especially if you're working out and you want to work with your joints. And fish oil is really good for inflammation as well. A lot of people don't know that inflammation is something that's always going on inside our body, especially as we get older. A really good fish oil is one of the few ingredients that actually acts as a systemic anti-inflammatory for your body. I mean, it's not like an Aleve or an Advil type product, because those things go like right to the inflammation. You need to get your inflammation down in your whole body. So every doctor I've talked to says, you got to get your inflammation down. Fish oil does that. So fish oil is a basic one that I recommend. And then I always ask people to check their levels of vitamin D and some of their basic nutrients that they might be deficient in. So on personalized nutrition, this is a topic that I've become highly interested in the last 4 or 5 years, because there's much easier ways to measure what you're taking. So I wrote a big article for Nutrition Business Journal that I write like one article a year. And I said, the future supplement company may be a technology company that uses diagnostics to tell us what we need to take. It may be that a diagnostic company from Silicon Valley becomes the next big nutrition supplement company, because I think down the road, we're going to have mechanisms to be able to measure our nutrients. So right now, the explosion in technology, right, along with all the data that goes with it, that we can start to measure, how many nutrients we have in our body, that's going to basically change the supplement industry. So there's going to be a time when I can take my cell phone and I can, do a questionnaire, or even plug in a device on my cell phone and maybe give it diagnostics of some sort. Maybe I could use my blood or my urine or even my saliva, and I can plug it into my phone. It'll beam up to, some software somewhere, and it'll tell me exactly what levels of nutrients I have. That to me is what the future of our industry is going to be, is measuring our nutrient levels, then adjusting our nutrient levels, titrating them, and then seeing how well we did and measuring them again. And that is basically the definition of personalized nutrition. Knowing what I need is different than what you need. And we measure it, get a base level, take our nutritional supplements, then measure it again and see how we're doing. If we know we're low in vitamin D, we take vitamin D. We notice it later by measuring our vitamin D levels, and then we feel differently. Same with hormones, same with fish oil, same with inflammation markers, same with all the markers that are important to our health. This is going to be the future of our industry, is measuring these things and then measuring them again.
So Tom, this has been fascinating. Thanks so much for spending this time. It was really terrific.
Thank you very much. I'm excited about supplements and the future of nutrition, and I think everybody's lives will be healthier and happier if they take the right kind of nutrition. Thank you.
Quite a fascinating business this nutrition business is, and I'm glad that we can share someone who has great expertise in that arena, Tom Arts, with you. You did it! This concludes episode 9 of the Supplements Revealed docuseries. What an honor and privilege to take this entire journey with you. As you can see, we searched far and wide, got the world's greatest experts on the most important topics related to supplements, because we know that supplements can have a profound positive impact on your life. So we wanted to make sure that we took our job seriously and we got the best people with the best information and brought to you in a compelling and hopefully somewhat entertaining way. So during the free viewing period, which is now going to end soon, this is the time that you can enjoy the discounts on Supplements Revealed by owning it. The prices will never be less than what they are right now. It's the time to act. It's the time to invest. And not only can you get the Supplements Revealed docuseries, all 9 episodes, but there are many bonuses that go along with it that have profound value, that can have massive impact on your life, and we're so excited to bring it to you. So, check out what package is right for you. Now's the time to invest in it during this free viewing period and join the Supplements Revealed community. I know for a fact you will be glad that you did. Thanks so much for taking this journey with me. It's been a real honor to be with you, and I hope we delivered more value than you were ever expecting when you started the journey.